Lily Harper was the teenager everyone thought they knew, smiling through her vlogs, glowing in every frame, but police would later uncover that her brightest videos hid the darkest secrets of her life. Lee Harper was the kind of teenager who seemed to have everything figured out, at least to the thousands who followed her online. She smiled easily, laughed often, and always seemed to find a way to make even the most ordinary day look like something magical. Her YouTube channel, filled with bright edits and cheerful music, painted a picture of a life untouched by worry. She filmed school projects, coffee runs, and walks through her neighborhood, all with a confidence and polish that made her stand out among other young vloggers. To her audience, she was simply living the dream, but police would later discover that her dreamlike image hid a world of fear and secrets. Her hometown was the kind of place no one ever expected trouble. Tree-lined streets, quiet cul-de-sacs, and familiar faces made up the landscape. Lily's house sat in the middle of it all, a modest home where her room overlooked the street. From that very window, she often filmed snippets of the sunrise or the glow of the streetlight at night. These details seemed charming in her vlogs, but when investigators reviewed the footage much later, they noticed tiny details her viewers had overlooked. A shadow moving just past the frame, the reflection of someone passing by, or the faint hum of a car engine idling at unusual hours. Each time, Lily had cut the clip short or added cheerful background music, as if covering something she didn't. One noticed her parents had encouraged her online project at first. It kept her busy and gave her a hobby she loved. She saved her allowance to buy editing software and a better camera. And by the time she turned 17, her channel had grown enough to feel like the start of a career. Viewers adored her ability to make ordinary life entertaining. She would walk to a cafe, narrating her thoughts, or sit in her room decorating notebooks with colorful stickers. On the surface, her world looked harmless, but those closest to her began to notice subtle changes. She grew more private about her filming schedule, often locking her door and staying up long into the night editing. She kept a small hard drive, hidden beneath her bed, separate from the polished videos she uploaded, and she never explained what was on it. It was only after everything unfolded that police realized the importance of that hidden drive. But even before then, there were warning signs tucked inside her online persona. In one of her earliest vlogs, she set her camera near the window to capture a sunset. As she chatted about school assignments and her plans for the weekend, someone walked past the glass outside. The figure was blurred and quick, but clear enough that it stood out once investigators froze the frame. At the time, not a single viewer commented on it, perhaps assuming it was just a neighbor. Yet, that brief moment became the earliest trace of what Lily never spoke about on camera. Her followers praised her for always appearing cheerful, never complaining, never hinting at stress. But those closest to her remembered the times when her eyes darted toward the window during dinner, or when she refused to take the same route home twice in 1 week. She never explained her behavior, and because she kept smiling online, no one pressed her for answers. It was as if the camera lens became both a shield and a mask, protecting her while hiding the reality that something was wrong. Years later, investigators would piece together her online presence like a puzzle, realizing that the cheerful music and fast edits weren't just for entertainment, they were cover-ups. Every jump cut seemed carefully placed, every missing second deliberate. The audience saw the highlights, but the silences in between, the raw footage she chose to delete, contained the real story. Police would eventually call it one of the most haunting cases they had ever worked on because the evidence had been there all along, hiding in plain sight within the carefully crafted world of a teenager's channel. Lies. YouTube channel gave the illusion of being complete, a neatly ordered archive of her life. But when investigators began to examine it closely, they discovered pieces missing, like chapters torn out of a diary. The first red flag was the irregular timeline. Weeks of her life had vanished from the upload history, sometimes with no explanation at all. Her followers occasionally left comments asking when the next video would come. But Lily either brushed it off with a quick excuse or ignored the questions completely. To the outside world, she was just a busy teenager balancing schoolwork with her online presence. But in reality, those missing stretches concealed the moments she never wanted anyone to see. Her friends later admitted that she always carried her camera almost obsessively, even when she wasn't planning to post. It was like a second set of eyes she relied on, documenting everything around her. Yet, when her channel was compared to her raw collection of files, the difference was startling. The online version of her life was filtered and cheerful, while the hidden drive contained unedited moments that felt eerie and unsettling. Hours of shaky footage showed Lily pacing her room at night, recording the sound of footsteps on the gravel outside, pointing her lens at a shadow crossing her wall, while she whispered to herself off camera. These clips were never polished, never intended to be seen by her fans, but they revealed the world she lived in behind the scenes, one where fear lingered in every corner. The most disturbing discovery was that Lily had labeled the files with numbers, as if cataloging evidence. File names like 2:13 a.m. footsteps or car outside again gave a sense of routine, as though she expected the disturbances to continue and wanted to keep track. It wasn't just a one-time scare, it was ongoing. Her online followers never knew this, because whenever she filmed during the day, she filled the screen with lighthearted chatter, covering her unease with jump cuts and cheerful soundtracks. The contrast between what she showed and what she hid was so extreme that investigators later wondered how no one in her audience suspected the truth. One clip in particular stood out. It showed Lily setting her camera on her desk, leaving it running while she sat in bed. For nearly an hour, nothing happened, except the faint sound of crickets outside. Then, almost too quiet to notice, there was a tapping at her window. Didn't scream, didn't move suddenly, but instead got up calmly, pulled the blinds closed, and sat back down. The footage ended shortly after. That video never made it to her channel, though parts of the same night appeared online in a cheerful late-night study session vlog where she smiled into the lens, editing out any trace of what happened before. The gaps in her uploads matched. These hidden recordings, whenever she failed to post, she was collecting moments like that one. Moments too strange or terrifying to share. She seemed torn between documenting her reality and protecting her image. To her viewers, the missing weeks were just typical breaks that any teenager might take. 2 investigators. They represented critical time when her situation was escalating, when the police finally recovered the hard drive after her disappearance. They realized she might have been using it as a silent alarm, her way of leaving behind proof if anything ever happened. The videos were rough, sometimes nothing more than shaky frames and muffled sounds. But together, they painted a picture of a girl who was not safe in her own home. Every missing upload became more than a gap in her timeline. It was a sign that something was happening off camera, something she couldn't explain publicly. Her carefully hidden archive revealed what her subscribers never saw: a teenager who was documenting her own fear. It was not the glamorous story her channel suggested, but the start of a trail that would lead investigators deeper into the mystery of what really surrounded her 2 days before she disappeared. Lily recorded what would become the most unsettling video of her collection. It began like any other, her camera propped up against a tree in the park, the frame filled with bright sunlight and her familiar smile. To casual eyes, she was still the same cheerful vlogger her followers adored, speaking quickly about her school projects and the snacks she had brought along. Yet there was something different about her movements, something heavier in the way she glanced around more than usual, as if waiting for someone or something to appear. When police examined this video later, they noticed that Lily's lens often shifted away from her own face. Instead of staying centered on her, the camera tilted toward the tree line, lingering longer than necessary. At normal speed, it seemed. Like nothing more than a wandering angle, but when slowed down, the truth became clear. A figure stood half-hidden among the trees, not moving, just watching. The stillness of the shadow was unnerving, because it was so deliberate. It was not a jogger passing through or a neighbor on a walk. Whoever it was remained fixed, as though their only purpose was to observe. That clip was never uploaded, but a copy of it remained tucked inside her private drive. Investigators compared it to earlier unposted videos and realized that the same shape, similar height, same outline had appeared in the background before. Months of recordings contained fleeting glimpses of this watcher standing near her. Street, visible in reflections, or captured for only a second before disappearing. Alone, Each sighting might have been dismissed as coincidence. Together, they revealed a pattern too precise to ignore. Lily had been documenting her stalker long before anyone knew she was in danger. The final recordings of her at home made the picture even clearer. Late at night, she would set her camera on a shelf, frame the doorway, and let it run. Hours of footage showed nothing but her restless movements as she locked and relocked her windows, sometimes sliding furniture against the door. She seemed to know she was being watched, even when the camera captured nothing unusual. Then came a moment that investigators would never forget. A soft rattling of the back door handle, caught on audio, followed by the unmistakable beam of a flashlight cutting across the curtains. Lily stayed off-screen, her breathing quick and shallow as the light swept the room. She ended the recording abruptly, and it was never seen until after her disappearance. What disturbed investigators most was how composed she appeared in these clips. She didn't scream or panic, but instead treated the recordings like evidence, as though she was preparing a record of events in case she could no longer tell her own story. The camera became her shield, the one way she could control what was happening. She filmed not to entertain, but to leave behind traces of a truth she wasn't ready to share with her audience. Her last day on record, captured in fragments, showed her walking quickly down a residential street holding the camera. Low by her side, the footage was jittery, the lens bouncing as she glanced over her shoulder. In the distance, a car could be heard trailing slowly behind her. She didn't speak to the camera this time, didn't smile or narrate. It was raw and silent, and it ended suddenly when she reached the corner. That clip stopped mid-step, as if cut short by something outside her control. This collection of final recordings revealed far more than her cheerful uploads ever did. They showed a teenager aware of the danger circling her, trying to document it in secret, while still maintaining the bright image her followers expected. She seemed to understand the seriousness of what was happening, but chose not to share it, openly leaving only scattered fragments of a much darker reality. These fragments became the last puzzle pieces investigators would study before the truth came into focus. Lily was officially reported missing on a cool autumn evening, when she failed to return home after leaving a friend's house where she had been editing footage. Her parents first assumed she had lost track of time, something she often did when she became immersed in her videos. But hours passed without a call or message. Her bicycle was discovered the next morning, leaning awkwardly against a fence near a narrow alley that led to the old train tracks. The scene felt wrong immediately. The bike was not damaged, but its placement suggested it had been abandoned in haste, almost dropped rather than parked. For investigators, that discovery was the first tangible sign that something serious had happened. At first, the missing persons case was treated like so many others involving teenagers. Authorities considered the possibility that she had run away, maybe overwhelmed by the pressures of school or her growing online presence. But those closest to her pushed back against that theory. Lily had future plans lined up, including brand deals she had been excited about, and friends insisted she had shown no signs of wanting to leave her life behind. It wasn't until police searched her bedroom more thoroughly that the true direction of the case became clear. Hidden beneath her bed was the small hard drive filled with the raw, unedited clips that told a very different story from the one she presented online. As investigators combed through the files, what emerged was a chilling timeline of surveillance and fear. The shadowy figure in the background of her park video appeared again in earlier clips, almost like a ghost following her from one location to another. And then there was the evidence she had captured by accident. The blurred outline of a license plate reflected in a rain puddle. The same vehicle idling in more than one recording, the sound of tires crunching gravel near her house at impossible hours of the night. Each piece alone seemed small, but strung together, they formed a trail pointing to a real and present threat. The breakthrough came when detectives enhanced one of the clearer frames from her footage. Though the license plate was partially obstructed, it was legible enough to trace. The vehicle was registered to a man living only 3 streets away, a 34-year-old whose name had never been on the radar of law enforcement before. He appeared, on paper, to be unremarkable, steady employment, a modest home, and no prior arrests. But when police executed a search warrant at his residence, the facade crumbled immediately. Inside the basement, investigators discovered walls covered with printouts of Lily's thumbnails, notes scribbled in the margins with upload dates and times, and maps of the neighborhood with routes highlighted. There were screenshots of her videos, frozen frames where she smiled into the lens, her eyes oblivious to the danger behind them. The most unsettling item was a notebook containing detailed logs of her activities, as though her life had been tracked with precision. The man had been watching her longer than anyone imagined, documenting her movements just as obsessively as she had been recording her fears. It was not only the physical evidence that chilled investigators, but the way it mirrored her hidden archive. Her unedited clips of footsteps and shadows were, in essence, her side of the story, while the basement materials represented his. Together, they painted a picture of a predator who had infiltrated the ordinary world of a teenage girl and a teenager, who had sensed it all along but felt powerless to speak it aloud. The discovery shifted the case from uncertainty to certainty. This was no runaway. This was no misunderstanding. The smiling girl on screen had been stalked, her every move studied, her private fears confirmed. And yet, even with the suspect in custody, the most haunting questions remained unanswered. Exactly had happened the night she vanished? And would the final truth lie in the footage she left behind? The last chapter of Lily's story unfolded not in the bright glow of her YouTube videos, but in the grainy, unfinished footage tucked away on her hidden drive. Among the countless files labeled with cryptic titles and timestamps, investigators found one that stood apart from the rest. It was shorter, only a few minutes long, and yet it carried a weight that none of the others did. The camera was positioned on a shelf in her bedroom, angled toward the door. Lily herself was visible. In the frame, asleep beneath a thin blanket, the faint rise and fall of her breathing just barely captured in the soft light. For several minutes, nothing happened. The stillness was almost deceptive, like a false sense of security. Then, as the seconds stretched on, the door began to creak open. Slowly, deliberately, it shifted inward, stopping halfway, as though whoever was behind it wanted to remain unseen. Before anything more could be revealed, the footage cut off without explanation to police. That recording became the most haunting artifact of the entire case. It suggested that Lily had not only been aware of the threat, but had anticipated it enough to set up her camera as a silent witness. She was no longer filming for entertainment. She was documenting what she seemed to know might happen. The file name only deepened the unease. If something happens. That chilling label hinted that Lily had left the video intentionally. A message to be found if she could not speak for herself. Though the suspect never confessed, the evidence stacked against him left little doubt. The vehicle traced to his name had been seen circling Lily's neighborhood in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. His basement contained not just notes and maps, but also fragments of her discarded life items she hadn't realized were missing, like a notebook from her school bag and a pair of headphones she once featured in a video. These personal objects linked him to her world in a way that could not be explained as coincidence. Still, the absence of Lily herself left the case incomplete. Without her body, without her direct testimony, everything remained pieced together through shadows and remnants. The most disturbing realization came when investigators overlaid Lily's hidden clips with the man's notes. The timelines aligned, almost perfectly. When she recorded footsteps at 2:13 a.m., he had written in his notebook, "Observation successful." When her camera caught the faint hum of a car engine outside, his logs noted, "Vehicle positioned, waited." She had been documenting her fear at the same time he had been documenting his pursuit. Two parallel records of the same dark story. One told unknowingly to protect herself, the other crafted with cold precision to track her. For those who studied the case, it was not just the crime itself that lingered, but the idea that Lily had lived in two worlds. In one, she was the smiling vlogger, carefully curating a life of harmless routines and colorful edits. In the other, she was a frightened teenager, leaving behind a digital trail of the danger creeping closer. Her audience never saw the fear, never saw the moments when she double-checked locks or stared out into the night. She had separated her reality from her performance so completely that only in hindsight could the truth be seen. The story closed not with the clear resolution her family longed for, but with the haunting knowledge that Lily had tried to leave behind a warning. The footage she never posted became her voice, speaking after she was gone. The police revealed what her audience could never have guessed: that behind the perfect thumbnails and cheerful music was a silent struggle for safety. Her channel had been the mask, but her private files were the mirror reflecting what really happened, even now. The case stands as a chilling reminder of the distance between appearance and reality. What Lily shared online was only a fraction of her life, carefully polished for strangers to admire. What she never showed became the key to understanding her fate. The truth lay not in the videos that reached millions, but in the few that were never meant to be seen. In the end, the smiling girl behind the camera had left the world a final message without words, one that would echo long after her voice fell silent.